So a couple of language things for you just to think about omitting. And like I said, really, a great deal, very, all of those kinds of things, kind of get rid of those. Get rid of the general and move yourself right to the specific. We don't need a lot of general information. We really want much more of the specific information. And there is nothing quantitative about really very great deal. Hopefully, we certainly don't want any hopefullys. For one thing, what does hopefully mean?
Maybe.
What?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Go back and think about third grade spelling. Did you all take spelling in third grade? All right, so you were doing a unit on prefixes and suffixes in root words. What's the root word? Hope. What's the suffix? Full, right? An ly because it's an adverb. What does it mean? What does hopeful mean? Full of hope. So when you write hopefully, you say, full of hope, I will graduate in December. Well, you may be full of hope. I don't think that's what you mean when you write that, right? I mean, we have taken hopefully and we've kind of taken it in an informal conversational context and had it mean something that, it really doesn't mean. Well, take a look at your words, because the words that you write have meaning, and you've got to make sure that the word that you've got there is precisely what you mean. And one of the, I have a handout for you here. One of the hardest, believe me, hardest words to use is the word and. And is not used because you're saying you need to know this and you need to know this. So, and has got meaning. It means there's something coordinate, there's something parallel, you're adding on to something, right? You can't just take any two ideas and join them with an and. The same thing is true with but. But has meaning. When you use it in a sentence, it's suggesting the opposite of what you just said. You can't just stick it in there. So these transitional words quite often are very problematic because you're not thinking about what they're actually saying. So what I have here is, this is a handout of transitions. And in part I'm giving you this to give you some variety. Guess which transitions you all use the most? Which ones are they? Oh, I didn't count them. See, I teach English, I can't count. Which ones do you use the most? Likewise? What? Nor. For example?
Thus.
Thus. There. I can't tell you, sometimes I can be reading a paper and I will have 2 thuses and 3 therefores in a page. Exactly my response is, whoa, boy, those are heavy-duty words, right? You don't see them as being heavy-duty words. I mean, they are. They're therefore or thus. They are drawing conclusions, right? They're showing, I have told you a bunch of stuff, and now we can have a big pronouncement. You can't just sprinkle them in every other sentence or a couple 3 on the page. It's just way too many. You cannot draw that many conclusions, on a single page. So it gets to be kind of rough going here for a reader. Like I said, and is a real issue. I see ands all the time that are joining just ideas because you say the reader has to know this and has to know this. It's got a particular meaning. So, I mean, that's what this list does. It just gives you what the definitions of the words are to kind of help you see what you can use instead of thus, therefore, and. I would eliminate but from academic writing, and I would go with, what's the more formal word for but? However, yeah, however is the one, it's probably the one we use more. Yeah, you're right, it's got the contrary idea. So in contrast, right, contrary to. So any of these do you see as being problems? Do you know most of them? Remember, like in an alternative in addition, there's a difference between moreover and further. Further suggests that you've extended something, right? Moreover has got a very different meaning. It means more than, right? It's much more additive on top of, where further is adding extended out. Right? I mean, you can't just stick, because it's an alternative or an addition, you can't just stick these in. They've got to, they've got a meaning there, and there's a connotation behind them. In addition is by far more formal than also and to. Quite often, rather than saying, putting it also in there, start the sentence with in addition, because it's just much more formal and academic. Likewise is tricky, because again, likewise, take a look at what that word means. You can't just stick it in there because you think it's cute. I mean, we all have our little favorite words, right? And for us, they carry a lot of meaning, but you've got to remember, for an outside audience, they might not. I had a student once who kept wanting to use accordingly. Every other sentence would start with accordingly, and finally it was like maybe 2 or 3 on a page. Every once in a while, I let him use one in the entire document, because accordingly is a tough word to use. It has to have the meaning that fits with it, and it's also unusual. How often do you read accordingly? The more unusual the word, right, the fewer times you can use it in a document, because pretty soon it's going to stand out. When the reader hears it too many times, they're going to say, what's this person thinking of? Keep using hence all of the time, because we just don't see hence that often either, right? Let's see, the other ones that are, we don't use things like nonetheless, nevertheless, and notwithstanding very often at all, but they work very well if you're in the precise place where you need them, because they can very clearly then explain the relationship that you're establishing. And that's what these words do, is they establish relationship. Purpose. That's what happens when you get down to the end of here. That's the kind of transition that you're looking at, right? So you've got to this end, for this purpose, with this objective, to address this need. Right? That's a phrase that's used quite a lot when you get down to the point of where you're talking about the purpose of your research. To address this need, to extend this research. Right? That kind of phrase is used there a lot to get into yours. Thereupon, under resultant cause, we don't use thereupon very often. When it comes to summary, the only one in there that I would say would be in summary. To sum up, boy, is that informal. In brief, why would you want to say in brief something that you have just spent pages telling me? Right? Nothing like taking what you said and making it seem unimportant to say, oh, well, I could have told you this just so briefly. In sum, in short, all of those are so, or on the whole, they're all so informal. If you're going to have to use something, use in summary. Repetition. Don't use any of those. I mean, don't repeat. As I have said, in other words, that is, to be sure, as has been noted, if you want to allude or refer to something you've already said, repeat it. But don't repeat it as a sentence. Repeat it as an introductory dependent idea. Remember, everything goes forward. And as soon as you said, as I said in the preceding section, you're going backwards, right? Remind me, say, because blah, 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 this, right? And the because blah, 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 or while the blah, 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 or in contrast to the blah, blah, blah. You're pulling in the idea and reminding me. It's very difficult on the reader for you to say, as I said on page 3. Well, what on page 3 are you talking about? And it's even worse when you start referring to graphic aids. You get into your discussion and sometimes you say, as seen in table 3, this. Well, what in the world was in table 3? I have to go back and look at table 3. Would you all do that? No. If you won't, neither will your reader. We're all lazy. I told you, we're self-absorbed, egotistical, and we're lazy. If you won't do this, don't make your reader do it. Don't expect your reader to. So repeat what's in table 3. You know, as this result, right? I can remember probably that it was in one of those tables back there, but table 3, when you've got 20, that's not going to be any help at all. For example, for instance, in any event, we probably don't use in any event. Instance, be a little careful with that because, again, instant has got the idea of time connected with it. So it's got a little bit of that connotation where, for example, is a little broader. I don't think I would say to tell the truth because it sounds like you would lie. That, again, is a little informal, right? Meanwhile, at length, soon, after a few days, most of the time, your time references are going to be much more specific. You probably aren't going to say when you're conducting research after a few days, can I replicate your study? Right? I mean, what's a few days? It's like saying you wrote a few pieces of, a few documents in your technical writing class. I love to write. A few documents to me is 20. You hate to write a few is 10, right? I mean, things like a few, short, some are all so vague that you're not telling the reader anything. Qualification, even though, or although. These are the mechanical transitions. And by mechanical, I mean you're actually inserting a word to force and wrench the idea between sentences or between paragraphs. You're better off if you can do it more subtly. You're better off, you know what coherence is, right? It's sticking together. That means where one sentence ends, the next sentence picks up. Where one paragraph ends, the next paragraph picks up. Where one section ends, the next section picks up. Where one chapter ends, the next chapter picks up. That's coherence. None of these things, sentences, paragraphs, sections, chapters, exist in and of themselves alone. They're all connected. And if you can connect them much more subtly, it just reads better than if you're wrenching them together with a screw and a bolt and a transitional word. So where one sentence ends, if you can pick up the next sentence, not repeat the idea, but pick up from there and move forward, it's a much more subtle, smooth transition. Pronouns help. What you've referred to as a noun in one sentence and you pick it up as a pronoun in the next, that's a transition. This, that, these, those, they work very well too. You know, we conducted A, B, C, D tests. These tests indicate, rather than repeating all of the names again, the these tests gives you the coherence and it's much more subtle, right? So those are ways of moving from one idea, you know, to the next, rather than putting a mechanical word in there to do it. Okay, so this was kind of like your first introductory writing thing. You and I are going to see each other again. We're going to do something with definition next, I believe. Because when I say a lot to people, define what you mean. And when I use that, what I'm defining, is I mean it much broader than a dictionary definition. So we're going to talk about ways of defining, because quite often that's essentially what you're doing. You're defining your research, you're defining your methodology, you're defining various concepts and ideas. So just to give you some strategies for doing that, And then we're going to move on to actually getting you to write things. So, I mean, I'm available for any help at any time. Has Dr. Harold given you my email address? I think I was copied on one he sent you this weekend. This is my email address. It's bjram@clemson.edu. The phone number down here, if you'd rather call me, and of course we're 864-656-0751. So I mean, I'm available for help. I'm available for individual help if you need, any kind of individual help you need. If you want to come as like a group or a couple of you to talk about something, that's fine. When you start having to write up literature reviews, methodologies, results, I am here to help you be able to come up with something that's of publishable quality. That's part of what my role is, as being the kind of writing